and we go to Switzerland. The next speaker is going to be Kristian Parker of the Oak Foundation. I'm very happy we have him here, not just because he is the vice chair of the board of trustees at the Oak Foundation, but also simply because of his personal engagement. I'm going to come to that later. In these days of acronyms, we always think, oh, is it OAK? With a dot in between, or is it really the tree? Well, in this case, it is really the tree, and the symbol, of course, stands for strength, resilience, longevity, and protection, and that, of course, is what we need. Do you remember yesterday, Princess Noof's quote, the Sisyphus work? Well, we're not just in Sisyphus work, we're actually having somebody stopping time. We have to do it really fast. So Kristian, why am I so happy that you're here? Because actually you lend a color to our discussion that we haven't had in these 2 days, or at least not that often. You're actually sort of somebody whose heart beats for the oceans, and we all know that the oceans are about to turn from a carbon sink into a carbon emitter if we're not fast. And we also know that the big currents, like the Gulf Stream, for example, are also slowing down and doing marvelous things, except not good for us. So I'm very, very happy that you're going to share your views, which I hope are slightly blue.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I'm not sure how blue they will be, but the oceans are always something I am thinking about when we do all the work we do. We are all connected as humanity the world over. No one is safe until we are all safe. We saw this very clearly with the COVID pandemic, the impacts of which were felt throughout the world. The daily impacts of climate change are also now being felt throughout the world. But the capacity to respond to these crises is not equally shared. Responses to these global challenges must center on equity and justice. Vulnerability is not only a concern for developing countries, it is shared concern by advanced economies as well. Meanwhile, we have seen that the waves of social change driven by people, the Black Lives Matter, climate movement, the Gilets jaunes, the youth movements, indigenous peoples movements, have shown us what it is possible when collective action is mobilized. These movements have been effective in shining the spotlight on issues that have been overlooked for a long time. Equally, community responses to the global health pandemic demonstrates agency and resilience of the human spirit in various parts of the world. Philanthropy can seek to push us closer to the social tipping points we need for a green and blue, just, healthy future before we breach ecosystem and climate tipping points. Bold action is needed to respond to the urgency of this decisive decade in human history. The science is clear, and it has been for a long time. What is new is an increasing number of people that agree that change is needed. 3 of every 4 people agree Earth is approaching a potentially abrupt or irreversible tipping point because of human action, according to the first major survey on attitudes to the global commons by the Global Commons Alliance. If we are truly to align the green and just transition with the Paris Declaration and the Agenda 2030, we must make sure that we take people along with us. How do we do this? At Oak, we believe we need to intentionally put our weight behind people-centered approaches and pushing for systems change. On systems change, it is ultimately about fixing the broken relationship between people, nature, health, and well-being by focusing on 3 systems: energy, food, and natural security. We have chosen these 3 areas not only because we can make a tangible difference by focusing on people's everyday lived realities, but most importantly because we believe these areas are important to enable a fundamental shift in our relationship with the planet. With a people-centered approach, we are driven by the conviction that transformation at scale of every sector of the economy requires decisive and radical action from governments, financial institutions, and corporations. However, these actors are held back by the inertia of status quo, vested interests, and a lack of vision beyond the 20th century economic and energy system. There is an overwhelming public support for meaningful climate action everywhere on the planet, yet this seems to be invisible to decision makers, even as the climate and environmental science becomes even more compelling. By taking the people-centered approach, we're not only center on equity and justice, the right thing to do, but we bolster a growing movement that will become unignorable by changemakers in power. People-centered approaches hold to account and put pressure on governments. We cannot win without harnessing untapped potential of the vast public support channeled to those who need to hear the demand the most. There is a vital need for the outside pressure to work in tandem with the insider policy and technical policy work philanthropy is well versed in. We are out of time to keep doing things the incremental way, an approach that has not delivered wins we need in the last 4 decades. We can start by cutting off the money pipeline for those fueling the climate breakdown. We must focus on our efforts on shaping recovery packages that deliver a cleaner, healthier future while securing a just transition for those communities that will be hit the hardest by this shift. These recovery packages must address the inequalities we see in society. It must start with the communities that are disproportionately hit by both climate and COVID. It must include their voices and vision for a cleaner, safer, and fairer future. And to be successful, it must ensure that this dialogue is authentic and that the balance of power is redressed. Only then will we overcome the fear that fuels resistance to this transition. What we do today, tomorrow, and the next year will define our pathway to success in the decades to come. We must think bigger, bolder, and take risks so that we disrupt the current system. This is what drives our grant making. And that by integrating racial, climate, and health justice into the fabric of our movement, we strengthen the social mandate that underpins climate action. The work we do in the next 5 years has never been more important, carried greater weight, or asked more from us. As a community, we must stand up, collaborate, and win together to safeguard the future for our children. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Kristian Parker, for sharing your vision, for your message, which is still constructive, even though the challenges